Hello and welcome to the Scottish Football Show. Coming up this week, a fantastic Falkirk booked their place in the Scottish Cup semi-final. Is the pyramid system about to be obliterated by Premiership B teams? And we remember some beautiful buddies 10 years on from St Mirren's Cup triumph. What a weekend in sport it's been. I am your host, Andrew Slaven, and despite my lack of morals, you'll be pleased to hear I was nowhere near the match of the day hot seat over the weekend, but here with our blue and white morals firmly injected into our veins, it's Tartan Army foot soldier and senior producer for West Ham, Laura Brannan. Hi, Laura.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm all right. I'm a bit raspy. I'm full of the cold. I'm bunged up to And joining us is Alan Shearer lookalike purely because of his, lack of luscious locks. It's editor and football filmmaker Findlay Marks. Hello, Findlay.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm just a wee bit worried about who on Match of the Day I was going to get compared to.
I don't know who we could compare you to, really. The Robbie Savage isn't on it anymore.
Probably be the closest, to be honest.
Clearly, it's the other one. It's got to be Ian, right?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe one week I won't pick on Finn's baldy heat, but there you go. Looking over the weekend, guys, has anyone seen the wonders of Duncan Ferguson eating a vegan croissant?
Yes, this is just absolutely brilliant. Wholesome content, I believe, is the word that Laura likes to use for stuff like this.
That term needs to be binned so quickly into 2023.
This is like your forte, Laura. This is, club media, getting the best content out you can.
Yeah,
it's all about content.
It's so relevant to anything, isn't it? Hearing Duncan Ferguson pronounce the words of food incorrectly.
It's not relevant, though, to the football club. The Forest Green Rovers, owned by Dale Vince, the Eco Warrior.
Mm-hmm. They're the first vegan football club, officially, aren't they, in the country?
Yeah.
Yes, they are, yeah. Amazingly, they are fully vegan. You can't even get fish in the grounds. When I've done games there before, it's all vegan. But Duncan Ferguson seems to have totally accepted this at the club, and he really enjoyed this vegan croissant. We should listen to it as well, because it's hilarious.
Big Duncan Ferguson here for Forest Green. Look what I've got. I've got some lovely vegan croissants called La Boulangerie. I think that's how you pronounce it. And they're fantastic. And if you keep on eating one of these a day, you'll look like me in the end. I'm just going to try one of these lovely croissants. Yeah, they're very nice, in fact. Quite nice, eh?
Have that with your breakfast?
I think I would, yeah. I think I'd take them home and actually have them for my tea tonight. A boulangerie is tasty no matter how you say it. And believe me, it's very difficult to say it, but it's very tasty.
He's genuinely given it a red hot go, even though I don't think he's ever heard of a croissant before, or especially a boulangerie. And he says both words exactly how you might expect somebody from Dundee to say both of those words. I think also as well, because it's boulangerie is the French word, obviously, for like a bakery, but the company's called La Boulangère. So they don't pronounce the actual sponsor's name correctly at any point in the video, despite one of the producers standing over his shoulder. It's quite endearing. It's quite sweet. But I think he genuinely enjoyed the product. So there we go.
I disagree. He nibbled that. He didn't take that. If that was a Rowan Square sausage, he'd be 3 biting that. He's having a nibble, man. He's unsure.
I do find it quite funny that the players all get subjected to eating vegan food when they're in the club. But I've interviewed one of the former players before that was there, and
who was that?
We'll let you do the maths on that one. But basically, after they've left the club, they just go to Nando's.
Oh yeah, I know this actually. I know this for a fact.
So yeah, great between working hours, but you're not going to hold it up for you're not vegan. So
this was installed when they were in the fifth tier in the National League. It was hilarious because there was a picture on the non-league paper of John Parkin, who, let's just say, has always been a big lad and centre forward, but we've always been double figures, sometimes 20 goals a season, and he was always spotted in Greg's at the end of the season, and there was always a picture of like John Parkin, Forest Green Rovers striker, spotted with 5 sausage rolls. Yeah, pretty funny.
They can hold it up for a couple of hours, but not out of working hours.
It's a cool wee club though. Nailsworth is a little wee town that they're based in. It's like 5,000 people in there. for a club that small to be in the Football League's pretty amazing. So Duncan Ferguson should be enjoying his wee time there. But any other funnies for us, guys?
Did you see the Dunfermline mascot?
No.
Yeah.
So when Dunfermline played Falkirk, was that last week? I can't remember what date it was now. The Dunfermline's mascot, Sammy the Tammy, is going around with a bucket collection in front of the Falkirk fans. So it's got written on it, donations, Falkirk South Stand. Because one day they'll have that belt. But they have to wait for a few cheeky donations first.
I've got so much time for mascot shithousery because mascots are a lot of the time a very needless addition because they don't do much, go around, wave at the kids and stuff like that. When mascots get involved and there's fights or races or they chuck
minute
things into the
silences.
crowd, love it. So that's what I was going to come to, Laura, because that is one of my favourite Twitter accounts on the whole website. If you've never seen Mascot Minute Silence, please, I implore you to check it out. It's basically when minute silences happen and the mascot stands with the very solemn-faced and grieving players and management on the sidelines, but obviously they still have a very child-friendly face on, and with their hands clasped behind their back. Some of them are absolutely outstanding.
I'm just looking at it now.
Have you never seen it before?
I've never seen that before in my life.
It's so good.
A good thing to share on an audio medium, but I would 100%. Would 100% direct all listeners to check that out if you've never seen it or heard of it. It's absolutely sensational. It is not a wasted venture, that one.
Brilliant to see a bit of a wind-up from the mascot. Don't see enough of that these days. Oh, well, last laughs on them. Falkirk are in the semi-final of the Scottish Cup.
It's brilliant from Kennedy. Couldn't resist the shot. It's gone in off the defender. Kai Kennedy celebrates just 2 minutes after Ayr United missed a penalty, and League One Falkirk suddenly stands 7 minutes away from Hampden and the Scottish Cup semis.
Aye, so we're recording this on Monday night, just off the back of Falkirk beating Ayr in the Scottish Cup quarter-finals. Pretty amazing night for Falkirk, reaching the semi-finals for I think the first time since 2015. When it's a bit of a repeat. The draw has brought it Inverness for Falkirk, which is class, really, because it's separated two teams below the Premiership. They'll be going to Hampden, but one of them will definitely go to a Hampden final, and one of them will be against Celtic or Rangers. It's probably worked out in the perfect way, Finn.
I think so. It's the draw that I was hoping for, quite personally, because I think when you've got Rangers and Celtic, the two big teams, and you've got two teams, especially, it's not just other teams outside of that. You kind of want those teams to be able to go to Hampden to enjoy the day and the opportunity that there's a very real chance they could make the final. I think having beaten Ayr United, Falkirk can go to Hampden with every confidence that they can match up to Cally Thistle. I think Cally Thistle will be happy as well that they've got probably what they feel will be the best possible chance to make it to the final. And I think with Rangers and Celtic, there is a weird thing of if you meet each other before the final of a tournament, it almost feels like if you win, you've got it out the way. You've probably most likely, in all fairness, played your most difficult game. Mm-hmm. And if you've gotten through that, you're probably setting yourself up for a better chance to win rounds beyond that. So I think for all involved, it is the best possible draw.
On that note, it's also where complacency can creep in as well, because if you've knocked out your biggest competitor in a semi-final, there could be a mentality of, right, we're going to the final and this is the easy part. We've done the hard work here, which is how Inverness, for example, were the team that put out Celtic in 2015 for them to go on and actually win the cup. There's absolutely no reason why that can't happen again, just on the final hurdle this time.
And bear in mind, Inverness have already dumped two Premiership sides on the way to this after they were reinstated because of Queen's Park's eligibility error, fielding an ineligible player. So it's a pretty amazing story with Inverness and Billy Dodds, like absolute class. When you take into account the kind of financial problems that they are kind of facing off the field, this could be a really special season for Inverness.
God, Queen's Park will be absolutely kicking themselves.
Oh, well, yeah, no, I have.
Regrets? No, it's good laugh on it. So
I didn't find it funny.
In other news, guys, I think we may have found a new number one for Scotland between the sticks. This is great news, isn't it, guys? Angus Gunn, Norwich City goalkeeper. He's got a good pedigree with his dad. 6 caps, I think, his dad had for Scotland.
He did. Excuse me while I just open a bag of popcorn and settle down to listen to what Laura's got to say in this. I'm just, have you got any thoughts on this, Laura? I'd be interested to hear.
No, I've got absolutely nothing to say on this whatsoever. I could literally record an entire podcast on this subject. This has angered me absolutely no end.
Go on, Laura.
This boy has 28 caps for England.
Under 21s and under 18s.
I don't care what level he's at. He has pulled on the 3 lines 28 times in his career.
All right.
This is an absolute shambles. This is so insulting to the 2 good young goalkeepers we have ready and waiting to take in over Craig Gordon and David Marshall. They have been in squads, countless squads that Liam Kelly and Xander Clarke have been in time and time again without getting a single minute on the pitch. What sort of message does this send to the 2 of them? There's been talk of months of them being the future of our game, and you're just going to cast them both aside and go, do you know what? All those squads that you were a part of, all those trips that you've been on, it means absolutely nothing, because we're just going to bring in a boy who's played 28 times for England, and he's going to just skip the queue, and he's going to be the future of Scottish football. I'm sorry, but that is just, it's embarrassing.
What's your take on Shea Adams then, for instance?
Exactly the same. It was a CV move for him.
Wow.
He doesn't count himself as Scottish, but he does it because he wants...
Good player for Scotland.
Messi could turn around and tell me he's Scottish. He's not Scottish though. But if you want it to put it on your CV, to bolster yourself, to get a good move and to get a pay rise, I get why players do it. It's not right though. And just because you can go, oh, but that one turned out to be quite good... Is he really? I don't think he's any loss if he doesn't play for us, but that's a completely different argument. You can't just pick and choose who your nationality is when you've played 28 times for another country.
No, that's. I think that seems a little bit unfair. I get your sentiment, but if anything, if a player's going to come into Scotland and they are a better calibre of player, or the quality is good, and they fit the Scottish model, that's good for Scotland, and that's good for the team, that's good for the setup. And if it makes us better, then that's all that matters, surely.
Hold on. So is he? Is he better? Is he better than Liam Kelly and Xander Clarke?
Well, I can't say that I've seen enough of Angus Gunn, but...
From the times that I've seen him, I think he's a really terrific goalkeeper. There have been games where I've watched him, and some of his shot-stopping ability, I've been like, that's really impressive. I mean, he was a youth player at Manchester City, wasn't he?
Yes.
That means nothing.
Wow. I think it means something. I think it means that you've probably been playing at a youth level that's high enough for, pretty much the world's richest club or one of them to come in.
Yeah, but he's 27. So what's he been doing for the last 7 years?
Well, he's been playing for Norwich and playing quite well.
Well,
it's also relatively young for a goalkeeper.
Well, he's not even playing all season for Norwich. Like, I'm going to hold my hands up here. I've never seen Angus Gunn play. And I don't really care. I don't ever want to see him play on a Scotland strip anyway. But what the replies I've seen in terms of his ability, people are replying to the Scottish tweets saying, oh, this is great. We've got to make the most of what we've got disposable, right? The replies are going, you've clearly never watched him play football before. So I don't think it's an all in out, oh, this is going to be great. This is going to absolutely change us, right? Because we don't need him. I'm sorry, but we don't. We have 2 very, very good goalkeepers who could step up and be the future of Scottish football. But Steve Clarke's not giving them a chance.
Who do you think should be the number one? Do you think Liam Kelly is the natural successor
of course
to Craig Gordon?
Yeah, of course I do.
He's had a few howlers of late. He's not had a great season, Laura.
No, but then Motherwell haven't had a great season. You can't blame something all on one player in the team. He's not, and he'll be the first player to hold his hands up and say he's not had a season like he has last year. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to start analysing the reasons for that. You could break it down and go, well, the coaches have been completely different this season. Like, the whole setup at the club has been different. How has it affected him personally in terms of, and professionally? I don't know. But you can't pull out individual moments from a season when the whole team are doing badly and putting him under more pressure than they did the season before and say, well, he's not good enough to be number one. I'm sorry, but you look at David Marshall when he was playing for teams in the English Championship who were struggling with relegation. He was at Derby when they were doing really badly, and he got us to the Euros in that exact same season. So you can't just correlate your team's
Well, that
performance.
argument works for Angus Gunn as well, then.
No, that's an argument for saying Liam Kelly then, in that case. Because Norwich are doing well in the Championship this season.
Of course. Yeah, of course. But you're judging a player purely because he's been asked to play for England under 21s and below, and he's accepted that. Now he has an opportunity because Steve Clarke has went to him and said, look, you're eligible. I mean, if I was Steve Clarke and I wanted a player, I'd be telling him, look, son, you're not going to get a game for England, so why don't you just come up north of the border?
That's so insulting, though. Why are we second choice? Why would you turn around to players and try and sell the dream of playing for Scotland by saying, you're not good enough to play for England, so why don't you just come and join us instead? It's so self-defeatist attitude here.
I don't think it's self-defeatism. I think it's really interesting because obviously we when this news first broke a couple of months ago, we actually even named that, I think that podcast episode was called Son of a Gun, because we were kind of debating around about this. And I think fairly unanimously, we weren't super happy at the idea of Angus Gunn playing for Scotland. And while for the most part, I don't have a major issue, even between people who have Scottish heritage and English heritage, who have maybe been at an England youth level, changing as that gets older. I don't have a major problem with it. I think it was more to your point, Laura, it was the level that Angus Gunn had played at and the fact that he'd repeatedly turned down calls from Scotland in the past in the hope that he would get a full cap for England, because at the time his stock was slightly higher than it is now. I think that's the biggest thing. So it's not just I think Shea Adams was maybe a slightly different thing, because I don't think, with the greatest of respect, Shea Adams was really knocking on the door to take Harry Kane out the team, or Marcus Rashford, or any of those other players, right? So it becomes fairly evident. And he was asked, and he accepted once he got to a level of playing for a full national team, that he would play for Scotland. That was the decision he made. Angus Gunn, as an adult, has been asked to join Scotland squads before in the hope that we could cap him and bring him into the Scotland team, because he would have had a cap by now. That's the thing. He would have been capped. He would have been in squads, and he probably would have been playing at certain points. He chose actively not to do that because he wanted to pursue an international career at the highest level with England. And that's the fact. So that, for me, is why this is a slightly different issue than just saying, oh, he's been capped at youth level. It's because of that added element. Conversely, and just trying to play devil's advocate here, I think, going back to that thing of it being defeatism, I don't think it is, because you have to work within the framework that we've got. We have limited resources. We are a smaller country compared to our biggest neighbour. Is a country of 60 million people. The talent pool is, multiple times bigger. You kind of have to use that. And I think when you do look at countries that try to utilise that, the easiest example is to look at Ireland in the late 80s and the 90s. How many of them were actually Irish born? Mm-hmm. 2 or 3?
We don't need them though, Finn.
But they qualified for World Cups and tournaments, Laura, because they were a better calibre of the Irish born player.
Sorry, I've said this so many times. I'd rather not qualify with a team full of Scots than qualify with a team full of English players that have just chose to turn around to Scotland after 28 caps and say, do you know
I think that's a really terrible take.
I would much rather fail in full honesty. He's literally come out and said, I've changed allegiances. To actually come out and say those words.
The fact of the matter is,
so
these players, these football players, these professionals are choosing to represent a country. It doesn't matter.
He made his choice.
Yeah,
this isn't club football.
His choice.
You don't choose at 27 years old the same way you choose to change your domestic club. This is not domestic football. They've picked his country.
If we end up seeing Angus Gunn doing a similar sort of feat that David Marshall achieved, I'm going to be well chuffed. And it's not going to be, I'm not going to be thinking back about any sort of, England games or games he played with an England shirt.
No, he's actively liked a tweet that gloated at Scotland not being at a competition. I'm sorry, but you can't have that sort of mentality. You don't change that mentality. He's got that. He thinks of himself as English. He's proved it time and time again.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that. It's not a club, Andrew. It's your national team. You don't get to pick your national team. You are either Scottish or you're not. And he chose at a very young age and stuck with that for the next 9 years of his career to remain English.
I think you look at the professional aspect of it. He is of course given himself an opportunity to go to major tournaments with Scotland. That's good for his career. Of course it is. I think anyone would do the same change if they had the option to. I just think it makes sense.
If Craig Gordon wasn't injured right now, do you think he'd be making himself available?
No, but you have to work with the situations that you've got. And that's clearly what Steve Clarke's been trying to do.
Exactly.
He's like, I have an issue here. I have no experience.
Well, he caused the issue because he's not giving his goalkeepers any experience.
And I completely agree with you. But in terms of experience and ability and level, the options that he's in now, the situation that he's in, a lot of it of which is his own creation, frustratingly. And again, we've made mention of that in the podcast before. I'm 100% with you on that. But in the situation that he's in, he has the opportunity to bring in a goalkeeper who's playing at a very high level, who I think of the amount that I've seen Liam Kelly playing and Xander Clarke playing and Angus Gunn playing, I think he's at least the same level, if not better than those guys. And he's giving himself the best possible chance to have the best squad. A good
shout out to Scots Pod, who have kind of tallied up some stats here. Save success stats, to be blunt. Xander Clarke touching 77%, Craig Gordon, who's obviously injured, 71%, Alan McGregor, 60%, David Marshall, 56%, Angus Gunn is at 73%. So probably, in terms of save success ratio, he's probably the second best. And England's number one, Pickford, is lower than that, and even Ramsdale's lower than that. So maybe he's not even going to start.
The hardest thing probably to understand for a lot of people is Angus Gunn being English born and probably considering himself an Englishman, but having a Scottish father and Scottish family, which I've got no reason to doubt that he's also hugely passionate about. Like, it's something he has obviously in his blood. It's something he's proud of. It is okay to have both of those things, and you can be passionate about both things. Again, I don't personally understand it. I'm just playing devil's advocate because I'm only Scottish, so I only understand from my own personal point of view. I can't comprehend playing for any other national team if I'd ever had the chance other than Scotland. I wouldn't have qualified to, but I don't think I could have brought myself to playing for anybody else. But that's not to do down anybody else who feels genuinely passionately about both sides. That said, from a personal point of view, I'm not thrilled that Angus Gunn would get a call up. I feel a bit like David Brent when the Swindon lot turn up in the office when he says, you know, I didn't want you here, but you're here now. So I feel a bit like that. But trying to be as unemotional and unattached as possible, the main facts are Steve Clarke thinks he's got the opportunity to involve a goalkeeper that's of a better level than the ones that we currently have at our disposal to make the squad better, to give us the best possible chance to qualify and win matches. And that should, at the end of the day, be the most important thing for Scotland.
Do you know what? It wouldn't even surprise me if Craig Gordon was actually fit for these two games. The rate he's doing his rehab at, which would just end all these debates, would be very funny. One last thing, I didn't like his dad. Somebody tweeted him, some daft, just saying like, well, how come he's Scottish now? His reply was, because Steve Clarke made him Scottish. Well, no, Brian, you made him Scottish. And that's kind of what your argument should be, is he's Scottish and that came from his family and his upbringing and his heritage, but instead he's making stupid wee jokes about, well, Steve Clarke changed his allegiance, and that didn't really sit well with me. I thought that was
when my daughter, who was born in Chelsea, is older and goes, Dad, I'm Scottish, right? I'm like, yes, Steve Clarke made you Scottish, darling.
And Marshall has saved! Yes! One big yes!
Right, there is talk of a new tier coming to Scottish football, separating League Two and the Lowland and Highland Leagues. It would be a fresh fifth tier involving 10 clubs made up of 6 B teams and 4 from the existing structure. So the pyramid's getting pummeled, guys.
That was a lot of numbers, Andrew.
Yeah, I know. I'm not good with numbers. I actually retired from maths when I was 16 and now I'm absolutely embroiled in it. 30 teams would be relegated as well. So I'm interested in what your take is, guys, and I will leave the floor open to either one of you to jump in.
The important thing to remember here is none of this is fact right now. This has just been talked about. We don't know the ins and outs of it all. And we're all very much it's all very much hearsay, and we're piecing it all together ourselves here. So look, we don't have the hard facts right now, but let's just look at the possibility of this happening and how it would be structured and what impact it could have if it does happen. So Andrew, I know you kind of threw a lot of numbers at us there. Let's kind of break it down a bit here. So obviously we've got the 4 top divisions in Scotland: Premiership, Championship, League 1, League 2. Below that, you then have the Highland League and the Lowland League, which are at the same level, Tier 5, but obviously split between geography. They're proposing, this idea is proposing that another league would come in between League 2, so Tier 4, and above Tier 5, the Highland League and Lowland Leagues.
Yep.
So there's different variations. They're talking about it could possibly be called League 3. It could possibly be an expansion of League 2 to hold 16 teams rather than 10 teams. Or it could be called something like the Conference League, which would then essentially relegate the Lowland and Highland League teams. The reason for this, and let's not be about the bush here, it's to bring in more Colt teams and give them more competition and more opportunities in Scottish football, which is the reason why this has been talked about. And this has been a long-standing conversation of reconstruction and how do we fit the Colts into Scottish football. And right now, we only have 3 Colts currently in the setup in the Lowland League. But all this could be a way of trying to give them more exposure, trying to get them higher up the leagues. One of the things being proposed here is if this structure does come in, the Colts could then end up being promoted as high as League 1. So that's the 3rd tier of Scottish football. And then obviously they'd hit that kind of ceiling and not go any further. But all of this seems like it is to try and please the Premiership teams.
Well, it is. The whole thing just kind of depresses me a little bit. I'd be in favour of league reconstruction in certain ways. I can't really see how playing the same team, 14 times a season has any value in it whatsoever. We know the reason why it happens is because whether people like it or not, the fact is the Old Firm are the draw to the market outside of Scotland. And the amount of money you can make from playing them is quite substantial. So that's the reason why the league was never changed to play Celtic or Rangers 4 times over a season or 3 times, depending on the split, how it works, or you might get them in a cup match or whatever. But for me, it's a much bigger question because we need to look at a way of holistically marketing the game much better, maximising these revenue streams and marketing ourselves better to an international audience, as well as making the game in Scotland better for the spectators, I think. Is kind of what we were saying a little bit last week as well, Laura. And I think one of the really dangerous things in bringing more cult teams in and doing this kind of things, I know other countries do it, but we already have a fairly oversaturated league system anyway.
Yes.
We've got a lot of teams for the size of country that we are. We're a country of 5.5 million people, and we have 42 league teams. England's a country of 60 million people, and they've got 92 league teams. Mm-hmm. So in terms of the ratios there, we have a lot of football teams. And I think bunging more youth teams in to, I would use the word clog up the spaces where it's already very congested anyway. It just seems a bit pointless. And also, I think, really unfairly will lead to devaluing of those leagues because they're kind of like half men's teams, half youth teams. There's a devaluing of the competitions at a lower level that I don't think is fair. I know the reason that the Colt teams were argued to be brought in was so that we could develop youth players. Let's call it a spade, so that we could develop youth players for the Old Firm, really, or for the biggest teams in the country.
Yeah, Finn, you're saying, obviously, this is to try and make players ready for the Celtic and Rangers first teams. But when you look at the numbers, they're not giving these players a chance in their first team. And you kind of got to question, when are they going to get put in? What stage in their career is this actually for? There was a paper that put out some stats during the week, and it was how many Scottish players, 21 and under, start a Premiership game this season for their club. And the numbers are actually quite soul-destroying when you look at it. Only 3 teams have given 3 players, 21 or under, they're Scottish, a start this season. Dundee United, Motherwell and Rangers. Everyone else is given less than that. There are some teams, Hibs, Ross County and Celtic, who have given no players under the age of 21 a first team start this season. So I mean, you've got to ask, what is this for? Who's this actually benefiting? There's a boy playing in Celtic's B team called Joey Dawson. Have you heard of him?
Nope.
He's not a household name by any stretch of the imagination. At least to non-Celtic fans, he's not known. This boy scored 20 goals in 21 games for Celtic B team this season. But when it came to the January transfer window, they signed and didn't look to think, we'll bring him through and we'll give him a chance. So again, they're choosing to go out and spend money and bring in foreign players instead of actually turning to the youth system, which is meant to be this tried and tested means of setting up future Celtic players, for example, for the first team. But when you've got a boy who's scoring for fun and he's getting the experience week in, week out, why are you not then taking him and going, well, let's develop him more, let's put him in the first team? I just don't understand when it's meant to benefit them.
I completely agree with you. And I think, one of the arguments that both Rangers and Celtic and now Hearts are putting forward is this thing of like, we can get players fast-tracked into first-team football and we can have ready-made Scotland internationals. Well, you're not going to see the proof of that for a number of years, are you? So I think the metric you have to look at is exactly what you're saying. It's like, what impact are they doing once they're kind of like getting to the glass ceiling of playing in the Lowland League and knocking on the door of the first team? And I think I'm only speaking here from Rangers' example because I know the B team a little, but there have been players that have been playing their trade in the youth team that have now this season, so that's last season, playing in the B team in the Lowland League this season, who are much more considered first team players. Adam Devine covered pretty well for James Tavernier and Borna Barisic at left back at various points of this season. Alex Lowry, I think, was earmarked to be a much bigger part of the first team picture this season, but has had injuries for most of the season, kind of in keeping with being a Rangers midfielder this season. But there's not really much point to these Colt teams if it's not going to be a constant stream of youth players coming in. I think the argument is as well, potentially, these players, not all of them are going to make it at Rangers or Celtic. In fact, probably relatively few. But are they still setting up these players to have good careers outside of the old firm? Are they going to be players that will play hopefully at a national level, but at least at a domestic level in the top flight or round about there, or go to England and have good careers there? If they're getting the chance to do that, and there's a better calibre of Scottish player coming through in general, not just to strengthen Rangers and Celtic, there might be an argument for it. But I agree with you. I think that the numbers, the stats so far, and it might be a bit early to tell this, but the numbers and stats so far don't seem to be backing that up. So I think it goes back to a lot of the concerns that the other teams have in the lower leagues of devaluing these competitions.
That's fair, but if we just look at it, for face value, we've already said that Celtic, Rangers and Hearts already have Colt teams, but the other Premiership teams don't. So this is where the other Premiership teams do benefit and would be up to speed against the likes of Celtic, Rangers and Hearts by developing their youth players. Do you know what I mean? So they get the opportunity to go down and play. I mean, Chris Commons calls it men's football. So young players go down, and that's why a lot of young players get loaned out, right? But if you go into a professional league where 3 points is absolutely everything, and you're exposing yourself to, opposition fans who are going to call you this, that, and whatever, the environment isn't so nice. You're exposing yourself to all these professional levels. That should in turn make you better. And if you've got other teams involved in that, great. My only concern really is if this does happen and it's made up of Colt teams anyway, well, that completely negates the whole point in the first place. Because you're up against other teams from the Premiership and there's only maybe, 4 other teams from the Highland and Lowland League. That just makes no sense.
100%.
Yeah, because then it becomes a Colt league and then it becomes just the reserve league all over again.
But that's
exactly.
Why would you not just bring back the reserve league?
Yeah.
And purely from a Rangers point of view, because I've spent a bit more time looking at it over the last number of years, the reason that they pulled out of trying to compete in reserve leagues and things like that was for the reason of there's no point competing against other youth players of the same level. We want to test them against men. We want to test them in real first team situations, which was the argument for competing in Colt teams. But I think, it's if all you're doing is creating a fifth tier that is essentially a reserve league that has the ability to get promoted in and out of the actual league system, it seems a bit pointless. And I think where Rangers had focused a lot in the interim years before the Colt team was accepted into the Lowland League was quality of matches, not quantity. So they would send the Rangers development team, as they called it, to youth competitions around Europe, around the world, to play against the very best players, not competing against other teams, which for the best will in the world probably won't be youth teams at the same level as them as well, because the old firm can cherry pick the best youth players in the country. So it's one of these weird vicious circle things. I think we can't lose sight of the impact this will have on the professional teams of the already established league clubs. And the fact that, going off the conversation we had with you and Booth Robertson the other week, that he was making the point of like the promotion and relegation is so convoluted and difficult anyway. It's set up in a way that actually prohibits ambitious teams that do have a bit more money coming into them from the lowland leagues, who are ambitious, who want to make an impact in the league system. And these teams that, for the best will in the world, are kind of there on historical levels. You know, for years they wouldn't even be relegated out the league. You know, we've had teams like Berwick Rangers and things like that drop out the league system, who I don't know if we'll ever see coming back up into the league system, just because the club is not at a level where they can compete even with the best Highland and Lowland League teams for league positions. So, for me, I just keep coming back to this. It is a much, much bigger, far-ranging issue and question that needs to be answered than just about cult teams.
Yeah, and they've been trying for so many years to try and get around this problem of, do we have the under-21s? Do we have the reserve league? Do we have the development league? And they've not really kind of nailed exactly what it is. I get Chris Coleman's point. It is that sort of men versus boys element of, like, how do you give them that competitive edge and experience week in, week out? But what I don't get is, and as we're saying, the league's kind of pointless when it is against 12, well, not in this case 12, but several other Premiership teams, youth teams, essentially. Why not just send them out on loan? I don't really understand. If you can't pepper your highest potential players out to different clubs, that established clubs in the established leagues, and give them experience that way, to me, that the fact that you're not for that's not happening, it reeks of these teams wanting to have full control. They want to have full control of all their players, from all their training sessions through to their playing style on the pitch as a unit. And that's not really realistic, because that's a nice pipe dream, but these players aren't going to come through and play as a unit, as one massive team in the future. It's realistic to send them out at 17, 18, 19 years old to get experience in a brand new team, be it League One, League Two, whatever, and give them that experience. What would be different is if we did this Colts team set up and then brought in a rule and said, well, okay, but the likes of Celtic and Rangers and Hearts, etc., they have to give X number of players, X number of minutes over the course of the season, or else you lose your place in the league. That might change it, because then they're forced to give these players the experience that they are so wanting, that this is all kind of set up for, yet we're not seeing the results. If there's actually a rule in place that forced them to do it, we might actually see the effects in the long term.
Yeah, I mean, they would never go for that.
No,
but I think
yeah, of course.
I think it is that thing. I think the reason why Rangers and Celtic and Hearts and other teams would argue for cult teams rather than just sending out your best players on loan is purely because they can control that. They can also try and develop youth teams that play in the same style, or try to play in the same style as the first team. And that's what they want to try and develop. So there's an understanding there between, you know, several players of a youth team that can hopefully make the step up to the first team. And there's not going to be as big a disparity between the football that they've been having to learn how to play, which is, not to do it down, but slightly more kick and rush probably in the lower leagues than it might be in the top flight and playing for Rangers and Celtic. So I think it's to control as many of these variables as possible and do that. So that's kind of the answer to your question. Why have B teams rather than just sending everybody out on loan? But
no, they won't. They would never do it. But then when you look at some of their best players in recent years, for example, Christopher Ayer, Callum McGregor, these players went out on loan to different clubs and had successful loan periods, learning their graft somewhere else, albeit a different league, albeit a different country, whatever, and brought that experience back to Celtic. And look how it's benefited them. It's benefited Cal McGregor in the long run. Would you have got the same experience putting Cal McGregor into a Celtic B League in the fifth year of Scottish football as he did when he went out on loan to Brentford? I don't know. Would you?
I don't think so. I actually think if you're looking to send players out on loan, I can absolutely see the argument of sending them to, the lower leagues in Scotland, because Scottish football is a very specific type of football that I'm not sure is replicated in a lot of other leagues. But especially, again, coming back to like Rangers or Celtic or teams like Hearts or Aberdeen, if they want to enter a Colts team, if the goal is ultimately to bring them up to international level, that's really what they're talking about. First team and international level, that quality of player, I don't necessarily see the benefit of sending them down, with the greatest of respect, to Raith Rovers or Falkirk or things necessarily. To me, I think it makes much more sense to try and find club partnerships across the world, across Europe, across different continents, to expose them to different playing styles, but playing styles that will be more akin to international level, European level, and high level domestic football. So I think that to me would make the most sense. And I think as well, if you're a young person, going on loan, maybe it's the first time you leave home and you're leaving Glasgow and you're going to Kirkcaldy, for example, it's going to be a jump. But are you going to learn more doing that, or the jump going from, say, Glasgow to Brussels or to Rotterdam or something like that? Go into a different city where you have to get used to living in a different country and away from all the home comforts and all that kind of thing. It's a different style. I think that, to me, would be much more beneficial. So I don't know why clubs don't try and go down that avenue rather than trying to just be like, well, let's get them playing, East Kilbride 4 times a season.
From my point of view, guys, I think if this is a decision that's made that inevitably ends up stifling competition and ambition for other clubs in the football pyramid in Scotland, then what is the point?
Yeah.
And it just stinks if that's the case, that we're trying to please bigger clubs in the system at the expense of others. And we're in a football competition where it should be based on ambition. And if that's taken away, there is no hope lower down the levels.
Big men are up from the back. El Mahoney right foot. Whips it. Oh, jeez, peeps, man.
Friday, the 17th of March, will mark the 10-year anniversary of St Mirren winning the Scottish League Cup, beating Hearts 3-2 in a thrilling final. It was their first major silverware in over a quarter of a century, cementing players like Stephen Thompson, Angus Gunn, Calves, David Van Zanten, Jim Goodwin, and of course, John McGinn into the club's history books. Laura caught up with Div MacDonald, a.k.a. Pie and Bovril, who's a mad buddy.
Newton. Gonsalves, Newton continued his run. Newton! They will have won the cup for St Mirren! Connor Newton, what a time to get his first goal for the club in a cup final at Hampden Park!
St Mirren can take all the time they want.
That's it! The long wait is over! Danny Lennon has guided St Mirren to silverware! There will be black and white ribbons on the League Cup tonight.
Dev, let's go back to that date. So coming up on Friday, it's 10 years since the day St Mirren won the League Cup. Take me back to that day at Hampden. Where were you sitting? Who were you with? What do you remember from it?
I'm glad to go back to it. It was it's one of those things you give in and you relive it from start to finish again. I hadn't slept properly for about 3 or 4 days in the lead up to the final. I was so excited on the day. My mate was flying in from Dubai. He was living out in Dubai at the time, and he'd come home for the 2010 League Cup final that we don't talk about, and he was swithering about whether to come back for this one, and I said, look, you've got to come back. We'll win this one. And he said, right, I'll come back. So I was excited to see him. He flew in the morning of the game. My whole family was going to the game as well. Some of them have never been to a game. Never been to a game since. A lot of my pals are there from Scotland games. It was just mad excitement. So got to the game and I was quite merry, shall we say. But I was in good form and I was buzzing for it. I was absolutely convinced we were going to win. And then obviously the first 20-25 minutes we got absolutely battered, annihilated. And if it had been 3 or 4-0, we couldn't really had many complaints, and that obviously took massive wind out my sails a wee bit. So to get the equaliser when we did before half time was huge, and it totally changed the game from that point. And then kind of half time came and I thought, well, one each to still be in the game, having been battered so much, that's great. We obviously started the second half on fire, go 2-1 up right in front of us with the goal in front of us, and it's Tomo and everything. So that was amazing. And then when the third goal went in, when Newton had smacked in the third goal, I had burst out crying. I meant floods of tears. And now I've got welling up even thinking about it now. I just couldn't believe it, because then you're thinking, that's it. We've won it. We're 3-1 up with half an hour to go, and Hearts are on their knees here. Boys around me, everybody was greeting, and then obviously St Mirren being St Mirren, we couldn't just win it 3-1. We had to then go through an unbelievable last 10 minutes after they got the second goal, hit the post, hit God knows how many times they hit the woodwork, and then the final whistle went, and I just felt completely empty then. I was so happy, but all the energy had gone. I had nothing there, and then it was obviously mad seeing them winning, lifting the cup and stuff like that, but it was just a weird experience. And because we had been through everything in 2010, which was probably the worst ending to a game of football I've ever been part of.
What had happened, just for the listeners who don't know?
Oh, you're going to take me back to that?
The
The 2010 League Cup final was when we played Rangers, and they got 2 players sent off. So we went into that game as massive underdogs. Obviously, Rangers at that time were pretty rampant, full internationalists. We played so well against 11 men. We were the better team. Then they went down to 10. They rallied, which happens in football. We've all seen that many times. But then when they went down to 9 men, people around me started celebrating. I'm like thinking at the time, we've still got to actually score a goal here, because obviously it's 0-0 when you're thinking, we are against 9 men, there's 15, 20 minutes to go. We should win it, of course, we should win it, but we never really created very much, and then Rangers ran up the park and scored with 5, 10 minutes to go. And I'll never forget that feeling, because obviously their fans went absolutely bananas, which of course they would do in a cup final, but I think the circumstances of it just exaggerated it all. And they held on and beat us with 9 men, which was, again, such a St Mirren thing to do. But that took, I was going to say it took a long time to go over that, but again, St Mirren beat St Mirren, 4 days later we beat Celtic 4-0. So go figure. What a club. And I was at that game as well. I was nearly crying at that as well. Spent all my life crying at some other games. But yeah, that was really sore. And then you think, well, clubs like us don't get cup finals very often. And, I'm lucky enough that I'm old enough to have seen us win the Scottish Cup, but I was only 15 at the time in 1987. So I'd waited a long time to get a final again in 2010. We could think, well, could be another 25 years till we're back, and then 3 years later we found ourselves back. And obviously the great thing about that final is you're not playing a Rangers or Celtic, you're playing a Hearts, who are obviously a bigger club than us, but you're still thinking, on a day, of course we can beat Hearts. We weren't expected to beat Celtic in the semi. Winning at Aberdeen was obviously huge as well, but beating Celtic was in a lot of ways it was more special, because at that time we maybe had 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 St Mirren fans there. It was what I would call more the hardcore for the semi-final, because nobody gave us a prayer against Celtic. And then the final we took 17,000 to, so it was full of folk like my sister, who doesn't even know the rules of the game or anything. She just went, it'll be a party, I'll go along, which is fine, but it meant the semi-final was that wee bit more special on the day. But yeah, so it was just, it was magic. The whole thing was magic, and I'd give anything to relive it again. And I do feel unbelievably fortunate, as I say, to have seen my team win 2 major trophies in my life, which is something that a lot of fans of smaller clubs in Scotland would give their right arm for, you know what I mean?
I mean, even just looking at the squad itself, this was a special team, wasn't it, when you break it down? John McGinn's the obvious one, Stephen Thompson as well, obviously, Gary Teal, Mark McCausland, David Van Zanten. I mean, obviously they've earned legendary status because they've won a cup, but even if they hadn't won the cup, where would these players have been in St Mirren's history?
You've got Vandy's probably, I think Vandy's won more honours with St Mirren than any other player. Vandy was hugely popular. Obviously you had Jim Goodwin playing centre half, which I was a massive fan of Goodwin at centre half, if I'm being honest, and I thought that was the weakest part of the team, him and McCausland. McCausland was a St Mirren boy, local lads. Gary Teal was coming to the end of his career but still had tons of quality. John McGinn, who just had the heart of a lion, and obviously not many people knew much about him at that point, and he's gone on to have an unbelievable career. Paul McGowan, who was man of the match, I think, in the final, who, for always an absolute bandpot, what a footballer he was at that time. He was absolutely tremendous. Tomo, I actually met Tomo and Banzi in a soft play in the week in the lead up to the cup final. We had kids at the same age at that time, young kids, and I had a brilliant hour in our company, just chatting about it all. We were all dead excited, and they were like, we're going to win this. We're going to win this. Tomo knew he was going to win it. And then obviously Isma was as mad as a box of frogs, and when he was on it, you just couldn't stop him. So all these players, they gave us all such a lift, and we had a great score. Kenny McLean sitting on the bench, couldn't get a game. Graham Carey on the bench, another tremendous St Mirren player, couldn't get a game. It was a great team and a great bond with the fans. Danny Lennon did well with that, and he kind of started that kind of bond with the fans, players sort of thing. Some managers get it and they know how to do it, and Danny certainly did that.
Yeah, you're talking about the bond with the fans. Talk to me about the days after the cup final. Did all the players join in with the fans?
So this is the worst part of the whole thing for me, right, personally, because I'm in the pub at 11 o'clock on the day of the game, and I go to bed, I think about 4:30 in the morning because the final was on a Sunday, on a Monday morning, right? So we all come back to mine. We'd been out in Paisley all night drinking, partying till the pubs closed. Then we came home. Then we of course watched the whole game again. 4:30 in the morning. I'm absolutely ruined, right? I'm dead. So the Monday I got up. My mate got his flight back. He had to go back to the airport. So I just went back to bed and I missed everything. I missed the whole thing. So I woke up at kind of tea time and my phone's buzzing. I've got like missed calls, missed messages. Where are you, Div? Where are you? Get into Paisley. The whole team's out. And I'm like, oh my God. So I missed it all. They went to, it was Cafe Boss at the time, a New Street. They went to, the whole team just went out. And obviously, as soon as they arrived in the pub, word got out. And then before you knew it, the pubs were full. And there was still a lot of boys out celebrating anyway. But they were in the Bull Inn. The Boys ran out of beer. They ran out of beer on a Monday, and then they all moved to the Bull Inn, which is just up the road. And that was on the telly and everything. The whole team were in singing. Tom had his guitar and all that. It was apparently wild. And that is my massive regret that I missed all of it. Thing is, if I went out, a couple of pints would probably have sorted me right out. One of those. But I just couldn't face it. I was dying. They partied very, very hard, that group of players. They really did.
I love the fact that they were mixing with the fans. I've got a lot of friends, as you know, that are St Mirren fans, and I was hearing, like, throughout the Monday, I was getting, like, updates and stuff in our group chat telling us what was going on, who was out, and at the time I was working for Celtic, and I was just thinking, that would never have happened in the world I was in at the time, and I was so jealous because I was thinking I would have love to be a part of that sort of close community where you've got players and a club of that size where the fans are so close to players. I think it'll always live with me. You missed it. I can imagine how painful it must have been for you.
Man.
Part of me is always like, I wish I was there as well.
Yeah, no, it looked incredible. And I've obviously, there's millions of videos kicking about of the players singing and stuff like that, the fans with and Cafe Boza at the time. It just looked amazing. And because the final had been that way, where there was so many, like, I'm not calling them glory hunters, but there's so many random people at the final, whereas the Monday was the guys who'd been through all the rubbish, the people who have seen us relegated and messing about in the second tier, almost dropping to the third tier at times. They're the guys who really deserved to have the party, and they had it on that Monday, and I freaking missed it. So slightly, very jealous, I'm raging, but let that be a lesson. If the next final we get to, I'm not overdoing it.
Well, just on that note, let's finish it up here then, Div. Like, looking forward. Obviously, before 2013, it was 1987. Can you see them win a cup again? Can you get to the pub with them the next day? Is this going to happen?
Well, I'd like to think so. I mean, that's the beauty of the cup, especially the Scottish, but it isn't seeded, where you can get a favourable draw, you just hit form at the right time, you find yourself in a final, and then obviously the gap between the clubs in the top two, that's certainly Celtic anyway at the moment, seems as big as it's ever been. But on the day in 90 minutes, as we've proven this season, we were the only team to beat Celtic. Last time we beat them home and away, actually. So it can be done. It's very, very, very difficult, but you always live in hope that you get that one wee cup run, and on the day just things go for you and you win it. But yeah, as I say, I'm so fortunate to have seen us live too. Some people will never see their team win a major trophy, so yeah, fingers crossed we'll get back and win it again, or the Scottish would be nice. Bucket list for me, I've never seen us play away in Europe, because all the European stuff for St Mirren happened when I was like about 12, when I wasn't allowed to go to Sweden or Holland at the time. And now I've seen fans of all sorts of clubs, Queen of the South, Gretna, Motherwell, whatever he's been in Europe, and I feel as though we've really missed out. So that's the bucket list for me. I want to see us play away in Europe, and winning a cup to get there would be the cherry on the cake.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Finn. Thanks to Div MacDonald, aka Pie and Bovril. Thank you to you for listening. Tweet us if you do like us, or tweet us if you don't like us at TSFS Podcast. We'll be back next week, so go and listen to something else now. Bye.